Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. My name is Nicki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts, ideas and stories from some incredible guests to hopefully inspire you to live more adventurously in your everyday lives. Hello and welcome back to season 6 of the Everyday Adventure Podcast. I am so thrilled to be back again. It's been a bit of a long break, a hot minute, as they say. So yes, it's been a while. I recorded my last episode for season 5 back in July last year. And since then, quite a lot has happened. We've moved. We're now living down by the sea. So that obviously took quite a lot. And we've changed locations. So yeah, kids in new schools, everything starting again. And yeah, my mind's been diverted. I've changed jobs. I've gone back to my business full time. So that's also something that's happened. And yeah, I think what I'm finding is for the first time in probably about a year and a half since we decided to move house, I'm starting to be able to look forward again and plan forward, not look forward so much, but plan forward. And that's really exciting. It's lovely to be in a new place where there's lots of different opportunities. I am absolutely loving being able to walk the dogs on the beach. I can't tell you what a revelation that has been to be able to get up and do that every single day. And just to be in this beautiful location is really, really special. And I feel very lucky. However, as I speak today, it is probably about -2 out there. We've had a week of pouring rain. It is mid-January. So yeah, I'm looking for the positives, or trying very hard to look for the positives, as I think probably many of you are. And with that in mind, I thought, as a slight change up to previous seasons, I know I did a few of these in season 1, but most of my episodes have been guest interviews, and that's been wonderful. We've had from some really incredible people who have found all sorts of ways to fit adventure into their daily lives, and we'll continue with that theme across season 6. So don't worry, if you're here looking for interviews and chats and conversations, then absolutely that's heading your way. But they're also going to be interspersed with a few more solo episodes, just to give you a little bit of the background to everyday adventures, why I'm so passionate and feel so strongly about the importance of everyday adventures and adventures in general. Some of the psychology behind it, because regular listeners will probably know that by background, I'm a business psychologist and I work with a lot of the themes that occur across many of the conversations that we have. But I thought it might be nice at this point to start bringing some of that knowledge to you as well, so that you get a chance to learn about some of the theories and the background to the themes that come out of many of the episodes that I've discussed. So it's not going to be a lecture, I hope, but just a little bit of an immersion maybe into some of these ideas. I'm not scripted, so I may well ramble. But I would love for you to get in touch and give me your thoughts as well on some of the topics we've discussed. And also if there are any topics that you would like me to cover in a bit more depth. We're going to kick off this morning thinking about comfort zones, because again, it's one of these terms that has, it's become sort of part of common everyday language, and it's used as much in the world of work as it's used in the world of adventure and outdoors activities. And we tend to sort of chuck it around without necessarily knowing, I guess, the background to it, which is fine, but also just thinking a little bit more in depth about what it means to step out of our comfort zones. Stepping out of our comfort zones always good, or is it bad to stay in your comfort zone? Because I think there can be a level of judgment that comes with that sometimes. So I just want to go through and maybe dispel a few myths, but also just think about where comfort zones or stepping out of our comfort zone can be helpful to us, when it might be the right decision for us to do so, how we can weave that into our lives so it doesn't feel like such a huge effort to do so, that it becomes part of the way in which we live, and really how we navigate this. So the first point really is just thinking about what is a comfort zone. So there are all sorts of definitions out there, but essentially it's your comfort zone is a place where you feel comfortable. You're not feeling like you're taking any big risks. You feel quite confident in your ability. You feel that you're in a safe space, really, that you know what you're doing, and that you're not being pushed, or you haven't what I call that sort of icky, sicky pit of the stomach feeling about, can I do this? Is this something that I can manage? You haven't got any of those feelings. It's probably where we exist for the majority of our time, to be fair. And certainly, as we grow older, it is where we tend to exist. I'd say children are more regularly pushed out of their comfort zone because there's so many new things in the world that they're having to learn, and they're constantly having to be challenged. But as they grow older, as we hit our teens and then our 20s, that naturally we tend to gravitate towards the things that we feel more confident in, and maybe push away the things we feel less confident in. And with that, we can develop a narrative around what we are good at and what we're not good at, the things that we feel we have the ability to do, and the things that actually are not us. And that can very much become very deep rooted, and start to form part of our identity as well. And often those questions are, what are you good at? What are the things that you enjoy doing? We will have quite a scripted response by the time we hit adulthood around those things. And that's absolutely fine. That's not problematic, unless it then becomes a barrier to you trying to do, or picking up and doing the things that you want to do. And that can be in your personal life, in terms of relationships, activities, what you believe is possible. It can also be in terms of your work life. So do you try new roles at work? Do you have a belief around, actually, I'm not very good at public speaking, so I avoid speaking out loud. I prefer to be in the background. There are all sorts of beliefs that we've developed over time. They can come from internally. They can also be as a result of something that somebody said to us. And so comfort zones really are only a problem when they become limiting, and we start to be entirely defined by what we believe we can and can't do. Some of you might be really familiar with the work of Carol Dweck. She's the originator of this idea of a growth mindset, and being either of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you, watch her TED talk, or she's got an accessible book called Mindset. But it's this idea that we can either see what we're capable of as defining and limited, and that we have a certain pool of potential and no more than that, or we adopt this sort of mindset of exploration and of possibility, where we are not defined by what we believe we are capable of, but that we are capable of so much more, and that when we aren't able to do things, this is an opportunity for learning rather than something that should be holding us back. And so this idea of a growth mindset permeates through this whole sort of idea of comfort zone, stepping outside of our comfort zone. It's something that also, I guess probably came into a sort of a common idea of reality. So Susan Jeffers wrote a book back in 1987 called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which again, some of you might have heard of. And within it, she has a really lovely visual diagram, or model, which basically is a series of boxes inside other boxes. And this idea that your comfort zone at the center is really small, is a little box, and it's surrounded by these bigger boxes. And that when we feel the fear and then we step out of our comfort zone, we do it anyway, that box starts to expand. We move into a new box. And then as we continue to try new things, our comfort zone expands again. So that actually, although we might have started with this really small box around us, by regularly finding ways to not get rid of the fear, but maybe find a way to navigate past it, or to be able to sit with it in order to do what we want to do, that actually our comfort zone starts to expand, and our self-belief and our self-confidence in what we're capable of expands too. And I love that, because it's such a wonderful visual picture of what stepping out of our comfort zone can do for us. So there are lots of links between going outside of our comfort zone and performance. There's research that's been done with athletes, and it shows that when they're exposed regularly to what are called challenge stressors. There was a research done by Fletcher and Sarkar back in 2012, and they talked about this idea that when they are put in those situations which sort of challenge them, that actually the athlete's performance increased. And at work, we often find that when we're faced with a challenge, we tend to feel more energized. So if we sit the whole time in our comfort zone, we can end up in this sort of go slow space where we know what we're doing, we're very comfortable with it, and whilst it's not risky and it's not challenging, it can also be super boring. And for some people that's okay, that's absolutely where they want to stay, and the idea of actually pushing ourselves and where it's not where we want to be. And but for others, actually, this belief that maybe if I tried something new, or I need that feeling of challenge in order to energize me, in order to motivate me in the work that I do, that's where this idea of stepping outside of our comfort zone comes into play. And then being outside of our comfort zone is also linked to building our resilience. So, one of the key aspects of resilience is around our ability to manage with uncertainty and change. Yeah. Does it throw us when things change from what we've expected? Do we need to feel like we're in control in order to navigate through the day? And being in our comfort zone allows us to stay within this feeling of being in control. When we step out of our comfort zone, it's an automatic risk. Yeah, we're doing something that feels a bit unknown, maybe a bit scary. That fear starts to come in. There is that uncertainty. What is going to happen? Am I going to be able to manage this? How do I? You might not know the way through this, but when we regularly step into uncertainty, what it means is that we start to learn. Sometimes the outcomes will be positive. It may well be that there are times that in our eyes that we fail, that we don't achieve what we set out to do. But just the very act of being able to navigate in that space of not knowing, to be able to take that chance and sit there and feel uncomfortable, actually increases our resilience, because it means we're more likely to be able to put ourselves in that situation, but also that when those things happen to us, when life events happen to us or things happen at work that we don't expect, and it might be small events, it might be small things that happen on a daily basis, or it might be actually bigger life events. We're made redundant, or we have some experience loss or grief, that actually, although we don't necessarily have the answers, and it's still incredibly painful and difficult and challenging to manage, that we have at our core at some level of belief that we have a way of being able to cope with this in some form, to manage this. At some point we will feel okay, or that we will be able to navigate a way through and see, even if we can't see it right in that moment. So part of being outside of our comfort zone is about learning to sit with not knowing and feeling uncomfortable. And if we practice it when we're not having to experience really challenging life events, then actually, when those events happen, we have built up a certain level of resilience to those. And that, like I said, means we may find it less likely that we are going to drop and feel like we are going to keep on falling and nothing is going to catch us, because we've developed what I like to call a core. It's like when you work on your core in the gym, and you build up that sort of muscle memory, and it keeps you sort of from falling over or from injuring yourself. And resilience is like your psychological core. Effectively, it's that thing that helps right you, bring you back, and give you a place from which you can start to navigate whatever it is you're having to deal with. So yeah, so comfort zones, or getting outside of our comfort zones, can be really powerful for that. And so how does this relate to adventure? Because obviously this podcast is called the Everyday Adventure Podcast, and it's about this idea of living more adventurously in our lives. And that's really what adventure is. Adventure is about stepping outside of our comfort zone. It's about doing something different and new. But I think traditionally adventure has always been seen as something really big, as something that it's maybe something we do once in a lifetime, or once a year, or something we have to build towards and work it towards. And absolutely, those adventures are really powerful and absolutely can take us way outside of our comfort zones, and really challenge us and be life changing. But that one of the issues that there are sometimes around those adventures is, one, it can feel like a really huge step to take, especially if it's not necessarily something that you do regularly. And therefore there can be a lot of barriers, a lot of things that can get in the way. And those can be physical barriers, but they can also be psychological barriers why we don't step out and do them. And the other challenge with them is that, and it's related to some of the research behind comfort zones, that actually there is a sort of sweet spot in terms of where you are feeling the fear and doing it anyway, or feeling like this is uncomfortable, but you're not panicked. And if we end up going too far out of our comfort zone and into what we could call the panic zone, or into a state where we just feel no longer able to think or function and it just feels horrible, then that's actually no longer effective in terms of building our resilience and in terms of helping us in a positive way. Then that can actually be really off-putting and feel terribly scary and difficult to manage, and it can prevent us from wanting to step outside our comfort zone again in the future. So it becomes a negative. What we tend to do then is go into our anxiety response, or our fight, flight, and freeze response, where actually we start to retreat from what we perceive to be the threat. So that might be, we stop doing it altogether, or we just don't know how to manage it, or we might get quite angry and quite upset about it. So what we are trying to do with it when we are moving or looking to move outside of our comfort zone is not go so far that we start to feel panicked, or that we start to feel so anxious that we feel we can no longer think, because that's not necessarily helping us. What we're trying to do is get to a point where we think, oh, this feels really difficult, or this feels worrying, or I've not done this before, but I might be able to find a way through this. I feel like I'm able to give this a try. And that's where this sort of idea of everyday adventures comes in, because adventures don't just have to be one-off things or big things. The effects that we get from those types of adventures can also be effects we get from a lot smaller adventures, but that are accumulative. So this idea that when we regularly take ourselves out of our comfort zone in a bite-sized chunk sort of a way on a daily basis, little things that we do that make us feel slightly uncomfortable can gather together, that can accumulate, and therefore help us. That's the thing that can build our resilience. We're doing it regularly, so it starts to feel like second nature. And again, going back to this image of our comfort zone expanding, if we're doing this all the time, our comfort zone gets bigger and bigger. And the other thing is that it's about thinking about, we will find it easier to challenge our comfort zone in some areas than it is in others. And I'll give you an example of this. So those of you who listen regularly will know that, there's certain sports that I love doing. Snowboarding, I'm generally quite happy going for a run. I like walking the dog. I like to surf. That is definitely something that takes me out of my comfort zone, because I don't do it very regularly. But there are some things where I think, you know what, I can go out, I could get a lift up a mountain and go off piste on my snowboard, or go down a black run. And actually, whilst that might be a bit challenging to me physically, actually it's not going to be as challenging, maybe something else, because it's something that I will have done regularly. If you took me really off piste, or if I'm in an environment I don't know, then that's starting to feel quite uncomfortable, and I might even move to another space, and start feeling it's pushing me too far out of my comfort zone. But generally speaking, some things that some people would find really scary, if they haven't done as much of something, if they haven't done as much snowboarding, I might find actually not quite so scary. However, the other week I decided that I was going to join a netball team. Now, on the surface of that, you might go, that's okay, so great. Most people play netball. Most women play netball at school at some point. So fairly familiar with it. It's, it's not a sport that we would consider extreme or adventurous or challenging necessarily, probably because of the familiarity with it. That's something that we did at school. But do you know what? I hadn't played netball in more than 30 years. And to be honest, I didn't have great memories of it at school. It was something that, I wasn't one of the girls who was picked for the team the whole time, or was out there, really good at it. So I could sort of vaguely remember the rules. I could just about run around the court, but it wasn't something that I had particularly fond memories of. But as I said, I've recently moved to a new area. I was looking for activities to get involved in. I spend most of my evenings ferrying kids around to various activities, so a lot of things are off limits. And this happened to be on a Sunday night. And I was like, well, I'm not doing anything else on a Sunday night. I'm looking to meet other people. And I've somewhere probably got hidden these sort of the vague knowledge of the rules and the skills. My daughter's been doing it at school, so I've got a vague idea of it. maybe I should give it a go. Genuinely turning up for that first session, and we turned up and we literally went straight into a game, and I did not know what I was doing, but turning up for that first session was one of the scariest things I've done in a very long time. The game was fast. When I say it's not adventurous, oh my goodness, how quickly did these women move across the court. It was incredible. But also, I just remembered that absolute fear. Like, I felt so uncomfortable, so outside of my comfort zone, turning up, not quite remembering the rules, not really knowing what was going on, feeling like I was going to make a total and utter fool of myself. And do you know what? I probably did, especially during that first session. And since then, I've probably gone on to make a fool of myself several times. But the point was, once I started and I got stuck in, and it was a lot of fun, despite the fear and despite being uncomfortable. And I got to the end of the session and I went, actually, that's fun. And I'm still a little bit scared by this, but you know what? I might come back and give it another go. But the other interesting part of it was about the point about the narrative we form about what we're good and not good at. I've spent probably the last 30 years telling everyone who I speak to, I really enjoy sport, I love sport, but I'm not really a team player. And not in the sense that I don't like working with a team, but that I've not really done team sports, not since I left school. And like I said, not had great memories of them at school. So I developed this narrative in my head of, actually, this thing's not for me. Team sports, not for me, forgetting that I love running around kicking a football with my son and playing family football and that sort of thing, not counting that, going, actually, this is something I'm not good at. Going back to that point about growth mindset, actually, what taking up or trying netball did for me was go, actually, okay, you're not particularly brilliant, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. And that helped me just start to think about actually what maybe are some of the other stories, some of the limiting beliefs I'm holding about myself too. So it's a very small example, and you probably, as I'm speaking, you can think of examples of things that you've done in your life as well that have, might not have felt scary to other people or difficult to other people, but for you in that moment, actually, you really did feel that fear. So what I want to do really with this episode is to encourage you to start thinking about, firstly, what are some of those limiting beliefs that I might have about? What is the story I'm telling myself about myself that I can and can't do, that isn't possible to me? And what does that mean in terms of me getting outside my comfort zone or staying within it? What are the things I'm not trying because I don't believe I'm any good at them, or that they're not for me, rather than because actually I've chosen not to, but for whatever reason? And when we start to do that, we can start to think about actually what adventures might be around me in the everyday that I could start right now and would give me that same feeling, that same buzz, that same excitement, take me to that place where I'm actually moving into a growth mindset as well. So the final thing I want to leave you with today is just thinking about, actually, so what can I do about it? So I know this. I now know that actually being outside of my comfort zone at times can be really helpful, can have an accumulative effect, can build my resilience, can build my confidence, can give me a way of challenging those things that are holding me back. And that might be in my life, that might be just enjoying the adventure, but it also might be, in the workspace, wherever I choose to apply them. So what can we do if we think, what, I'd quite like to step outside of my comfort zone a bit more regularly, but I'm finding that really challenging? So here are a few small tips, things that you can do. So the first tip I would give you is to start small. Yeah. And that's not to say don't go and sign up for a big adventure. And absolutely that does work for people. But if it's something that you're struggling with, or you thinking about signing up for something, and then all the sort of the self-doubt and the negative thoughts start to come into your mind, and you sort of start to back out of it, maybe try something smaller. If you're thinking, actually, I'd really like to do a coastal marathon, or an ultra marathon, or I'd like to go and do something really amazing, impressive with running, but I don't even, that feels actually too big. That's starting to make me have all of these thoughts. What could you sign up for that's local? Is there a local 5K or 10K? Can you start going to park run? Is there something that is much smaller, but that allows you to build? And I know from pretty much every guest that I've spoken to, even those who set themselves the goal of the really big adventures, and I know this is something that Preach Andy talked about, and currently doing this incredible expedition crossing Antarctica. She had the really big goal in mind, but then breaking it down into those tiny manageable chunks, that's the thing that enabled her to do it. So I would really encourage you to think about, how do I might have a really big goal or a really big adventure, a really big move out of my comfort zone. But what are the smaller blocks that are little, sort of nudging at the edges of my comfort zone, or just stepping over the line? What are the smaller blocks that will get me to do it? And the smallest block might be, I'm pretty confident going for a 5K run, but signing up for a local event where I don't really know anybody, and there might be sort of other running clubs there, and I'm not quite sure of the route and all of that, that might start to feel a bit uncomfortable. Maybe that's the thing I can sign up for, even though my goal might be the ultra marathon. So I'd have a think about that. How do you start small? How do you break those down? I would say, related to this, think about the thing that's got the minimal amount of barriers in the way, so it's really hard to make excuses. So going back to my netball example, in the end, the thing that got me there was the fact it was on a Sunday night, and it's the only night where I don't have to be somewhere with one of the kids, taking them to an activity. So there was no excuse. The only excuse I had not turning up was my own fear of making a fool of myself, it not being for me not enjoying it, whatever those sort of narratives in my head were. But I knew I could get there. So, it was 10 minutes down the road, really local, and they were keen to have me. So I would say, pick something that's got the least amount of barriers that's going to enable you to do it. It's just as effective as doing the really big adventures. And I think the other thing is to think about, what do you love doing? If there's something you love to do, but you haven't been able to do it a while, because our fear can build up just as much around something that we love to do and haven't done in a while, or something we've never done. And for me, I guess I experience that regularly with surfing. If I've had too much time out of the water, getting back in can feel like a really big thing, a really big blocker. But the fact that I love it, I know I will find a way back into it. I know that there is, even though it's going to be uncomfortable at first, I'll find a way to navigate it. And then that enables me to take that step. So think about, what's the thing that I really love to do? And can I build on that? Or can I find a way back into that? Or maybe take that a little bit further? And then I think finally is just to remind yourself that all of these steps, every time you do these things that take you out your comfort zone expands. It's not a static thing. We don't have a certain level of things that we can do and things that we can't. It's sometimes our comfort zone might shrink. There might be a lot going on in our life where actually it's really hard to step outside of that, and actually we just need to feel safe, and that is completely fine. And there are other times where we're going to feel more able to reach out and step over that line and start to expand it. So not feeling bad when you're not doing it, but also recognizing that those small nibbles, those regular excursions just to the edge or just outside of your comfort zone, can have just as much power and just as much validity as the really big ones too. So that's just about at my half an hour point, which is what I like to generally keep these episodes to. So I hope that's been interesting for you. I hope that's given you something to think about. As I mentioned, please do get in touch and let me know. Is this a sort of topic you'd like to know more on? Are there other topics within this whole space around adventure that you'd be interested in doing or hearing more about? And do you enjoy these solo episodes? Is this something that you would like to hear more of too? Like I said, don't worry, because I've got some really amazing guests lined up for you too. So this season will be a bit of a mix of both, but I will be sharing a whole load of incredible and inspiring stories too. But if you want to reach out, you can get in touch with me via Instagram. I'm on Resilience at Work. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nicki Bass. You can get in touch with me via my email, nikki@resiliencework.co.uk, or my website, www.resiliencework.co.uk. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful week, and maybe go and try out some of these nibbles of your comfort zone yourself. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care. Bye.